Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name is Scott Daly, and I am a constant reader, and I'm ready to get started. And as usual, I've got my anti-telepathy hood on, and I'm good to go.
And I'm Matt Freeman, and I'm...
What are you laughing at?
Oh, nothing. You just remembered something funny.
Oh, okay. This week on the show, we begin part 2, Blue Heaven, by reading chapters 1 through 4. The quartet reunited. They plan out their next moves as Mordred Deshane observes them from afar. Mordred then gets hungry and eats our old friend Walter O'Dim. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
Well, we finally got to spend some time with Spider Baby, so that made me very happy.
Yeah.
Really quite a lot of focus on Spider Baby, a surprising amount, to be honest. And I enjoyed every second of it.
Yeah, by page count, we spend most of our time with Mordred in this week's reading, for sure.
Spider Baby.
I'm sorry. Are we only allowed to call him Spider Baby now? Is that how it's going to go?
I suppose I'll lighten up on that. But.
Is this like Baby Yoda, where you were like, ignore. I'm just going to keep calling him Baby Yoda.
Mordred is just such a serious name.
I mean, if you want to be technical, what you need to call him is Where Spider Baby.
Where Spider Baby, that's true.
And then that could be confusing because you could say Where Spider Baby, and I say he's over there.
I mean, interestingly, he transforms between baby form and Spider Baby form because he's got the baby face. There's no fully spider form. So,
well, Matt, I'm going to ask you a question. Does a werewolf transform between a human and just a normal wolf, or does it transform between a human and a wolf man?
Fair point.
There you go. It's consistency.
Touche. Checkmate.
Hey, do you want to talk about this book now?
All right.
Before we get into this week's discussion chapters, we have to talk about our bonus Patreon podcast, because today, as we were recording this on the 9th, our newest episode of Other Levels of the Tower has released to our patrons. This is a Patreon exclusive podcast that Matt and I do, where once a month we sit down, we watch a Stephen King adaptation, and we spend an hour or so talking about it. And this month we watched the movie Needful Things, a movie that neither of us had seen before, and I thought it was a pretty good conversation, Matt. I think I spent most of my time complaining about how this movie wasn't the book, which isn't the best look in my opinion, but nonetheless true. It is definitely not the book.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was fun. It was fun to talk about. I'm glad that we watched it, actually. And it was fun to watch, although maybe not a good movie, but
definitely not a good movie.
But go check that out.
Yeah, you can find it on patreon.com/doofmedia. If you pledge to us at the Doof Troop level or above, you will have access to that episode and the previous 2 episodes of Other Levels of the Tower, where we covered Stand By Me and Carrie. And then, of course, a bunch of other bonus stuff is there. We're not the only ones that are doing bonus stuff for our network. We have all of our friends that are making bonus exclusive podcasts and a bunch of other cool stuff. So head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and check that out. That's it.
Yep.
I'm done with plugs.
Good.
Let's talk about the Dark Tower.
Okay.
We begin with chapter 1 of part 2. And in this chapter, the quartet reunited gaze upon the remains of poor old Mia, Matt. That's where we start this chapter and this section, looking on the desiccated remains of poor old mother. And one of my favorite parts about this is this opening part where we're in Roland's head, which we talked about last week. We aren't in Roland's head as much in this book as we have been in the past, but here we are firmly in Roland's head, and this is what Roland thinks. So much you did, he thought, gazing raptly at the dusty, dissolving face. So much you did, and so much more you would have done. Aye, and all without a check or qualm. And so would the world end, I think, a victim of love rather than hate, for love's ever been the more destructive weapon, sure. I love this, Matt, because I love this for multiple reasons. Roland really seems to bear Mia no ill will. He doesn't hate her. He recognizes this thing in her that I think has been true ever since the gunslinger, right? I think Roland said something directly to this when he realized he was falling in love with Jake way back in that book, that love is a strong weapon to use against people susceptible to it. Roland knows this, and it's been used against him multiple times. And I think it really does set up the main idea of these 4 chapters, and possibly this entire part of the story, but definitely these 4 chapters we're talking about today.
Yeah, we're framing the themes, right? I mean,
Sure.
these have been themes throughout the story, but yeah, we're bringing them up again, emphasizing them, and really, I mean, it makes sense. This is a kind of coda for the character of Mia. The book is pausing to reflect on who this character was and the purpose that she served in the story thematically.
Yeah.
She was a source of horror. She was a villain, but in the end, when we got to know her, we realized that she was driven by love. Her baby, was her tower, and Roland can empathize with her willingness to do absolutely anything for her, for her thing that she loves, her thing that she puts ahead of everything else.
Yeah.
And so can we.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think it is interesting. You're absolutely right that this is like a coda for Mia, and then we're going to move on to spending time with her son. That's the main idea of these chapters is what's going on with Mordred Deshane. So, sorry, Spider Baby.
That's right.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just really great setup. It's really great to start. We didn't have to do this. We didn't have to look over Mia. Like, Mia has been talked about a lot, but I think it's important for Roland to see her. It's not like Mia's relationship was almost entirely done through Susanna for reasons that are very obvious, but Roland had a part in that relationship too, right? When we first met Mia, we met Mia through Roland's eyes as this monstrous woman that has taken over Susanna and doing these terrible, horrible things in the swamp. And so for him to get his final bit of closure where he's not angry and he is on her page, I think is really important.
Yeah. It's funny. We do kind of brush over the fact that there must have been a conversation where Susanna was like, yep, that's Mia. And then everyone was like, Mia's one of your personalities. What do you mean that's Mia?
A long story.
Yeah, they cut her out. And then the baby got faxed, and
I mean, it is interesting because in this chapter, both Susanna and Jake will tell the story of what happened to them, to Eddie and Roland. But at this point, they hadn't done that yet. So like, they're just like, this Mia, I'll tell you more in a sec.
Yeah.
Then we get this part right here, where this is Eddie speaking out loud, where he says, sometimes I think we'd all be better off if the people who mean well would just creep away and die. That'd be the end of us, Big Ed, Jake pointed out. They all considered this, and Eddie found himself wondering how many they'd already killed in their well-intentioned meddling. The bad ones he didn't care about, but there had been other ones, too. Roland's lost love, Susan, was only one.
Yeah, for sure. This coming so close to the beginning of this section makes me wonder how much of a important thing this is going to be in here. We meet some poor innocent people at the end of this section, and I'm like, oh, well, is that bad news for them? And also kind of, it reminds me of those grays that Eddie and Susanna blew away in Lud, where like we sort of felt bad about it, even though they weren't exactly good guys, but like you understood that like, well, they suck, but they were kind of made that way by the horrible circumstances of their existence.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there have been others that are escaping me right now. But I feel like maybe King's setting up some killing of innocents in the near term.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because we've talked many times throughout the course of the show about how the Quartet kind of blows into an area and just leaves it destroyed in its wake. I mean, that was kind of the initial inciting incident of this book was Roland's complete destruction of the city of Tull. The town of Tull is probably better. But that's something they've done. It really wasn't until Caliber and Sturgis that like they left a place better off than it was.
and a few innocents still died there. But
right.
Overall, there was like a net. There was a net benefit for the first time.
Still negative one Benny Slightman, but yes, a net benefit. And so I think that's something that they've noticed, and our characters are kind of reflecting on. And I mean, we're about to head towards a prison, right? That's like where we leave off on these 4 chapters, as our characters walk through a portal and start to head towards the Breaker prison, the place where the people that are trying to bring down the tower are being held. So they're obviously going to blow through that place. I think they repeat the phrase rescue them or kill them like 6 times in these 4 chapters. And it's like, oh, so you don't really care. It's like, rescue them if we can, but well, they're going to bring out, let's kill them. Let's kill them.
Yeah. It's the, just make sure we know where our heroes' heads are at.
It's great. So then at this point, Jake and Susanna begin to recount the stories of basically the past book and a half. And they start to talk. One of the big things they talk about in this recounting is the trinkets that they have had. The Scold Padda that they used so successfully in the Dixie Pig. And of course, this reminds Jake of the key he got way, way back in the Wastelands, the key that got him into the door in the Dutch Hill House and got him to Midworld. And they're starting to ask this question like, hey, wait a minute. Where are these things coming from? And the quartet comes to a collective decision that, why? From Stephen King, of course. They mean this both figuratively in that they're characters in the story, and literally in that Stephen King walked into a empty lot and dropped a key there, which is perfect because then we go on to explain the concept of Deus Ex Machina. Basically, they don't call it this until later in the book. Eddie can't remember the name of it, but that's what we're talking about here. And I want to read this section, and then I want to talk to you about Deus Ex Machina for a while. The writer, Eddie said. He weighed on the idea, then nodded slowly. He vaguely remembered a concept from high school. The god from the machine, it was called. There was a fancy Latin term for it as well, but that one he couldn't remember. Had probably been writing Mary Lou Konopensky's name on the desk while the other kids had been obediently taking notes. The basic concept was that if a playwright got himself into a corner, he could send down the god, who arrived in a flower-decked buck-a-wagon from overhead and rescued the characters who were in trouble. This no doubt pleased the more religious playgoers, who believed that God, not the special effects version who came down from some overhead platform the audience couldn't see, but the one who worked in heaven, really did save people who deserved it. Such ideas had undoubtedly gone out of fashion in the modern age, but Eddie thought that popular novelists, of the sort Cy King seemed to be on his way to becoming, probably still use the technique, only disguising it better. Little escape hatches, cards that read, "Get out of jail free," or "Escape the pirates," or "Freak storm cuts electrical power, execution postponed." The god from the machine, who was actually the writer, patiently working to keep the characters safe, so his tale wouldn't end with an unsatisfying line like, "And so the quartet was wiped out on Jericho Hill, and the bad guys won, rule Discordia, so sorry, better luck next time, what next time, haha, the end." So this is just, first of all, this is just a wonderful Eddie-esque stream of consciousness that King just falls into that I love. It's just like, it's so classic Eddie that he just pours the stuff out, taking asides about Konopensky, Mary Lou Konopensky, and why he was a bad student because he was too interested in her. It's vintage Eddie, and I love it. But
God who weren't in heaven. Who worked in heaven.
Who worked in heaven. Yeah. But this is King talking about the concept of Deus Ex Machina. And he's kind of saying, the thing that I love about it is he's kind of admitting here, it's a little hack, right? He's saying, this is what authors do when they've gotten themselves in a situation that they can't figure out how to get out of. And so they just give themselves a get out of jail free card. And yet he's admitting that he did. This is what I find so fascinating about the Dark Tower.
Yeah. I mean, the author is admitting that he's doing. So
I am doing, and I have done this.
Yeah, and that's what this is.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to talk about here. And I think this ties into our discussion of Ka. So, buckle up. Yeah. I mean, so like, first of all, I mean, just to riff on what you were saying for a second, like, you ever notice how frequently it's such a frequent complaint that people will single out, like, either a story has a Deus Ex Machina or the story has an author self-insert character. What they mean by that is usually like, the character is just like supposed to be the author, except he's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this book has literally inserted the literal author. And then in the book, the characters talk about how the author is obviously doing Deus Ex Machina to solve their problems. So it's utterly hilarious. It's like King singled out a lot of the criticisms that he hears and maybe doesn't think have much merit, and just decided to do all of them on purpose, really obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, there's a kind of side-eyed winking at people here, because I do think the author insert critique has been one that has been leveled at Stephen King for his entire career. Mm-hmm. You know how many writers there are as protagonists of Stephen King books? That's another Stephen King character. Like, it's just a constant refrain. And I think it is pretty fitting that none of the main characters of the story are writers, right? He never made them writers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's saying, Yeah, I did it. Yep, I'm doing it. It's fun because in a way it makes The Dark Tower a series that is a series about one man, about Stephen King. It is a series about addiction, about the what your tower is and what you're willing to do to get there. It's also a series that's inspecting and commenting on the craft of storytelling in very specific ways. And this is one of those very specific ways. This is he's poking at the concept of the god in the machine, and he's thinking about it, and in true Stephen King fashion, he doesn't do this from a lofty place of like, here's this concept that I am better than. He's like, yeah, this is a thing that all like the pop novelists do, like me. Like, yeah, I did it. Here's examples of how I did it. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that this is something that I've done. And that it doesn't have to be inherently bad. Like, It doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Well, and my contention, which I'm going to go into, I think over the course of today's discussion, is that like, that's what writing is in a certain sense. Like everything, every word on the page is an invention in the first place. This isn't just a bunch of events that the author is transcribing. This is all a confabulation.
Well, I mean, in this case, maybe.
In this case, maybe, yeah, right. But the point being that like when you accuse an author of Deus Ex Machina, aren't you just saying like it's redundant? It's like, well, obviously it's made up. Oh, you mean it feels overly convenient is what you mean, right? Like, yeah. And the thing, like I think you and I have called things Deus Ex Machinas before. There's an appropriate way to use the term, obviously. Yes. But I think maybe King is saying like, look, like it's less of a clean distinction than maybe you imagine it is. I'm going to go on a little exploration here.
Do it, man. Go.
So like, yeah, King is here. He's saying to us through Eddie, hey, obviously I'm the one putting in these escape hatches, because if I didn't, I'd be constantly writing characters into inescapable corners. Even something like, Blaine can't answer extremely stupid and bad riddles is a kind of escape hatch, because, you could just say like, well, the AI, it's a super AI. It should be able to answer any riddle, and then they lose, and then they die. The end of the series. But he puts these things in to avoid unsatisfying endings. The bad guys won, rule Discordia, unsatisfying. But then this implies that he also needs to avoid unsatisfying endings that go in the opposite direction. He needs to avoid the unsatisfying, and then the good guys won, Roland got to the tower without much further difficulty. Everyone went to therapy and resolved their issues, and everybody got married. He could write that way. He could end the Dark Tower that way. The Dark Tower could have been 5 pages long. That would have sucked. We wouldn't have cared about the ending. We wouldn't have cared about the characters. It wouldn't have actually been published. So that's where this all connects to Ka, is that, there's a necessity of good storytelling, which means that the story can't end too, badly in a way that feels wrong, or too easily in a way that feels wrong. He's going to do Deus Ex Machinas to help out the characters, but he's also doing, devil ex machinas to kind of put obstacles into their paths. That's the entirety of storytelling is sort of doing these two things constantly and trying to kind of hide the fact, right? And so that's that's just, and I think if I wanted to say what Ka is here, it's like Ka is the interplay between these two necessities of how to go about telling a story.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I love that. I think you're fundamentally correct, and I think the key to this is the line in this narrative, or this paragraph of Eddie's, that says, popular novelists of those the sort Cy King seem to be on his way to becoming probably still use this technique, only disguising it better. That is the key phrase, right? Because and we've talked about this on many of our podcasts, and I'm sure we will talk about it again. I think, and I'm generalizing here, so nobody get mad at me, I think when people complain about not liking things, they usually are complaining about the wrong thing. When someone says, ugh, Deus Ex Machina, and they mean that in a negative way, they're not saying, they're prescribing their dislike to the trope or to the literary device. But that's not why they didn't like it, because when those things employed correctly are shocking and satisfying and wonderful. And I mean, you just kind of, you disguise it, you tie it into a theme, or you tie it into something, or you can, I mean, and what I love about this is Stephen King is, through either confidence or stupidity, calling himself out. Like, yes, I disguised this, but I'm telling you exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating. And I think you're spot on that this is that we have had so many devil ex machinas.
Yeah.
I love that term throughout this book. So many things that just happened just because the will of Ka, our author, said so.
Yeah. Right.
Because that's what makes the best story.
Yeah. We need drama and conflict. And that means bad guys who are competent and scary. And even bad guys who succeed sometimes, you know, like they just talked about the death of Susan. I mean, that's a devil ex machina, right? That's the, and you know, to be clear, King could have just as easily said, and then suddenly there was a big rainstorm and it put out the fire, and and they saved Susan, right? Like, but like it's his choice both directions. And I mean, I hope the book continues to explore this idea. But because I mean, I think it's important, and I do think King wants us to be thinking about storytelling and maybe reconsidering some of the ways in which we tend to criticize. Because like you said, I agree that I've maybe 1/10 of the times that I see the accusation of Deus Ex Machina leveled at something, I will agree that it was actually Deus Ex Machina. Usually I'm just like, no, you just didn't like that. I agree with you completely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not working on you for some other reason.
Yes.
It's like the term plot hole, which nobody uses correctly.
Yeah.
Nobody.
It just means I didn't like this, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, the Blaine thing, like the Blaine thing where Blaine can't answer like a really stupid riddle, that was set up because we established this character conflict between Roland and Eddie, where Eddie keeps telling stupid jokes and stupid riddles, and it really pisses Roland off. And so it's woven into the plot in a way that feels really satisfying and really great. Nobody would ever call that a Deus Ex Machina, except it obviously was created and woven into the story by the writer, right? Like it's just a matter of how well did he disguise it.
So often we pull the trigger on that word or that phrase rather, related just specifically to how overt the setup was for it. Like if it's really obvious and overt, doesn't feel like a Deus Ex Machina. If it's very, very minor and only hinted at, we were talking about the Eagles and Lord of the Rings, which were set up. We had a whole scene in that story where the Eagles were set up as a thing that is used to rescue people. So is it a Deus Ex Machina when the Eagles show up at the end? Well, I mean, it's more of a catastrophe, but that's a whole nother conversation that I don't know if we can get into right now. But I think this is a great transition to talk about the very next thing, though, because they transition to talking about Stephen King, and they transition to talking about the fact that, well, we left him in 1970 something, but he must be alive now because he wrote the books in which these trinkets appeared. So, which is a whole big chicken egg conversation that I don't even want to get into. But the point is, when they mention this, Susanna thinks something about how Stephen King died. And doesn't say anything. And the text says, had Susanna told them, a great many things might have happened differently or not at all. And then a little bit later, so this time, something which might have been spoken was not. And the Deus Ex Machina, which might have descended to rescue a writer who had a date with a Dodge minivan on a late spring day in the year of 99, remained where it was, high above the mortals who acted their parts below. So that's kind of exactly what you're talking about, right? That is a reverse Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, that's our devil ex machina that stopped her. Because that would have been too easy. She just, let's just resolve this. Let's just resolve that whole thing. And I'm still not really sure how to think about this because I mean, King obviously did not actually die, so either something does intervene in the story, or we're just doing something even weirder that I can't put my finger on yet. But,
I mean, it is kind of an open question right now, right? Where we know that in the world that you and I exist in, Stephen King is not dead. But we have been told many, many times throughout the last couple books that Stephen King has died. That Susanna that has heard that message multiple times. We've at the end of Song of Susanna, we did the whole writer's journal thing, and that writer's journal ended on a news report that proclaimed the death of Stephen King. So we also know in this key world that they can't go back in time, right? So I don't know. We don't know what to think about that. And we also, a little bit later in this section, basically get told that when the writer dies, the tower falls, right? I think Flag says that directly. So yeah, we're just not sure what to make of any of this yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure not, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. So we have Nigel return, Matt. I thought you probably thought you were done with old Nige, but he's back.
I did.
He comes to say hello to the quartet, and they begin with his help to kind of decide on their next course of action. They're going to double back to the Thunderclap and attempt to save or kill the breakers before they knock down the final two beams. But as they're talking, they mention that there's a new player on the scene, Mordred the Were-Spider, and he means to kill Roland and, quote, to rule in his father's place, for the Crimson King is old, and I have come to more and more to believe that he is imprisoned somehow. If that's so, then he's no longer our real enemy. So we get confirmation on this. This is kind of the first time that Roland has presented this idea that he's imprisoned, although we've gotten little bits and pieces throughout the last couple books hinting towards something like this. I don't know if you even picked up on those. There's like I think there was one like imprisoned is something that was said at some point in the past book, but they kind of rush by it.
Maybe sort of subliminally, to the extent that I wasn't shocked to see this here, but yeah, it's it all kind of, I think I feel like when Roland sort of exposits in this way, we're just meant to take it as like, okay, that is the way it is. He is in prison. And then we're kind of going to find that out even more certainly from Walter in a little bit. So
yeah. Walter confirms that in the next couple chapters.
Yeah.
And then Walter himself is taken off the board.
Mm-hmm.
So King is kind of removing our antagonists from us. We say like the Crimson King, the leader of all the baddies, is no longer a real enemy, says Roland here. Then Walter O'Dim is killed. So who's left now? I mean, Mordred, right? Mordred?
Mm-hmm. Mordred. Yeah, I mean, it feels like a bit of a twist to be taking away our big bads. The king, but on the other hand, the Crimson King, he has been this far off presence. He's been this Sauron, not really personally relevant to the characters. The Man in Black has been more directly relevant, but when you think about it, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, he's like what has he really done? What has he really done to directly confound our characters? Mordred is the new kid on the block, and very well positioned to be a thorn in everyone's side. I think not just narratively, but also like thematically. You have all these. Yeah, I don't know how much to go into it now, but like it seems like Mordred potentially has some reason to like have a specific animus against each of our quartet members.
Sure.
I that probably needs to be elaborated, but I think I'm just going to leave that there for now. So yeah, I mean, the Crimson King is the Emperor. Mordred is Kylo Ren. No, I don't know. That's stupid. Let's brush that aside. Yeah, it's interesting though. I guess if I have one prediction though, that Mordred is the handsome man that Susanna was foretold to meet.
Okay,
that's my prediction. Okay,
interesting. I hadn't thought about that in a bit. Interesting.
Yeah, but that still hasn't happened, has it? Unless, I don't think she met anyone who was handsome between then and now. So,
I mean, who knows?
Was Sayer handsome? I don't think so.
He was extremely handsome.
Yeah.
So Nigel brings out some paper and pencils, and Jake kind of draws a handy map for that plans out our characters' next moves. And if you're not reading the audiobook, Matt, you can see the handy map. It helps you position everything. So I included it here in the script for you, just so you can see
Thank
it.
you.
So here's the plan. They're going to take the wolf portal, the portals that the wolves used to get into the Thunderclap. And so they're going to go to what they call Thunderclap Station. And then from there, they're going to head over to Devar Toy. I think I'm saying that right. I don't actually know. How do they say it in the audiobook, Matt?
It's more like Devar Toy. It comes out sounding very Western, even though it's obviously a made up fantasy word.
No, it's real, Matt. This is all real.
Oh, sorry. The Devar Toy is how they'll say it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Devar. I like Devar better. I know it's fine. Devar Toy. I don't want to piss anyone off. The big prison, basically. So this is where the breakers do their breaking.
Yep.
So there's going to be a big showdown here, Matt. And the chapter ends on, "There'll be guards," Eddie says. "Maybe a lot of them. What if we're outnumbered? It won't be the first time," Roland said, which is like a badass westerny ending to a chapter.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I guess, what's interesting about how this wrapped up is I was surprised at how fast they converged on this plan. Like, as if it were incredibly obvious that they got to go to Devar Toy, and they got to kill guards, and they got to break out breakers. It's like, wow, this is quite a sidetrack though. Like, this is, you just found out about this, and now you're completely changing your whole kind of near-term goal. I'm not like objecting or saying that like this doesn't make sense. It's just like it's a surprise, right? It's a big surprise in terms of what direction I thought this story was going.
I mean, is it the sidetrack or is it the track?
See, to me, it feels, and maybe I'm missing the kind of why this is necessary, but it seems like a distract, or like Roland's been saying, like, I feel like we might be hours away from the tower. And then it's like, okay, well, now we have to go do a prison break. It's like, well, that's a whole plot line. That's a whole thing.
Yeah, but these are the people that are bringing the tower down. So, like, the breakers are doing breaker-y things, and it's breaking the beams. And we gotta stop it. Stop it, breakers.
Yeah.
If they don't do that, the tower will fall.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I get it. It's sort of like in a video game when, you get to the door that you've been fighting to get to for 2 hours, and then the door is like, actually you need a key. And in order to get the key, you have to fight through that other dungeon over there, which is another 2 hours of fighting. And you're like, God damn it. And then you're still going to have fun fighting through that other dungeon, and it's going to be great. But in that exact moment, you're like, what the hell? I got to the door. Why?
Matt, there's still a lot of pages left of this book. We're not getting to the door for many pages.
I thought maybe we just had like 400 pages describing what the Dark Tower looked like when they got there.
No, this is the thing, man. This is it. This is the if they take down the Devar Toy, then no more breakers. No more breaking.
No more beams. I gotcha.
The tower is safe. The characters win. We can all go home.
Yep. Everybody gets married. Yeah, I get it plot wise. I'm just expressing to you my emotions,
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm trying to, I was worried there might be confusion there, so I'm just trying to clear it up.
Yeah. I get it.
All right, well, let's move on to chapter 2 then. Chapter 2 is called The Watcher. And this chapter begins with the quartet's new friend, Nigel, acting kind of funny. He keeps twitching and randomly counting in different languages and talking about characters from Stephen King novels. In this case, he's talking about Greg Stilson, the antagonist of The Dead Zone. Just, it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, since I haven't read it, I'm sure the nuance of the reference went over my head completely, but I did, chuckle to see, why is the robot talking about Stephen King? Okay, whatever.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have some fun with these references here in a little bit, but yeah, it was a really random Greg Stilson reference here. Who is, well, I'm not gonna explain the plot of The Dead Zone to you. One day.
All right.
So Nigel teaches us a little bit more about these robots, Matt. The robots of North Central Tronic. He and his type, like Andy, are called Asimov robots, which are an obvious reference. And they have a bit of a problem with logical faults. Their logic circuits kind of just just break down and they just get these faults that happen. And so they solve this problem by quarantining these logical faults away, which works super well because none of the robots in this story have ever acted crazy and gone nuts and killed people ever.
Yeah, definitely a good example of Asimov's laws at work for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. But the reason Nigel is kind of losing his mind is because he says that his quarantine on his that he's like used to keep these logical faults at bay is starting to malfunction because of what Susanna did to his eyes. This is also just like a lie, right? Like this is just a lie.
Yes, which he's not supposed to do. I adore the idea that the smarter robots go insane faster, just because then you immediately think of Blaine and you're like, yep, he's the most insane of them all and the smartest of them all.
Yeah. Blame the Asimov train.
Yep.
But Susanna, our quartet member, who can see better than any of them, thinks that Nigel is being a little dishonest here. In fact, she thinks the problem is that Nigel is being dishonest. He's lying, and he's not supposed to. Like, a robot shouldn't lie. If we're calling them Asimov robots, right, as you just said, these are the rules, right? He's lying to the people, and he's using these tics as a way of disguising the freak out he's having by breaking that rule. So she estimates that Nigel is helping Mordred, and she is of course correct because, as the book says, a mother always knows, which is just wonderfully creepy.
It is. It is creepy, and that's one thing I kind of want to keep paying attention to is the fact that in the subsequent bits, we're going to get a lot of these ideas, a lot of references of like Mordred has two fathers and so forth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Almost no references to Mia and really very few, if any, references to Susanna. And it's like, well, he has two fathers, but he has two mothers too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that seems like it could be important,
sure.
At least in terms of his relationship to Susanna and back and forth, which leads me to the next thing I was going to say, which is that it's interesting. Susanna didn't mention the fact that she heard that Stephen King was dead, and she also didn't mention this. She doesn't tell them when Nigel leaves. She doesn't say like, "Hey, I'm pretty sure he's lying and covering for the spider baby." So like she's still being secretive. It's like it seems like she hasn't learned the lesson that we kind of hoped everyone would learn from the Wolves of the Kala.
Yeah. I mean, I think she's just feeling as conflicted about Mordred as we'll find out Mordred is feeling conflicted about his father, right? That
Mm-hmm.
there's these complicated emotions of hatred and disgust and love all wound up together. And I think she doesn't know how she should act here. I think the text does say she thinks about telling the others, but she kind of holds off because we'll see. We'll see if I need to talk about this a little bit later.
Sure. Yeah. I think you're right.
I really like this part as well. The quartet heads to Nigel's room, and inside Nigel's room, they find the complete collection of Stephen King sitting there on his shelf. Nigel might be a liar, but he's got really fucking good tastes, Matt. He's got really good taste, this Nigel.
It's so bizarre.
And I love our characters look at this and they're like, And Eddie goes, "Roland, do you think we could pack the works of Stephen King and take them with us?" "Maybe," Roland said, "but we won't. They might confuse us." "Why do you say so?" Roland only shook his head. He didn't know why he said so, but he knew it was true. It's great because here's the thing about Stephen King's Connected Universe, Matt. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to see how the things reference and play off each other, but it's also really confusing and sometimes kind of inconsistent. And I think that's kind of what King is admitting here, that like if you want to sit down and try to predict what's going to happen at the end of the story by reading the complete oeuvre of Stephen King, you're just going to be a little more confused than you were when you started.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that also Ka, i.e. the necessity of telling a good story, wouldn't allow the characters to like read thousands and thousands of pages and then start metagaming their situation using like awareness of motifs and plot devices and supernatural information from other King works, because that would make the story real bad. So yeah.
God, I could kind of imagine a version of the story that did that and had the characters saying, "Quick, check page 47. What happens?"
Yeah.
What happens to Pangborn?
Yeah, but see, I like that we're getting to the part of the podcast where I could have just replaced everything I just said with Ka. They can't take the books with them because of Ka.
Yeah.
And then everyone would know what I meant.
Yes. I think it is undoubtedly true, as Roland ponders here, even though he doesn't understand why he knows, that our characters reading all these books would just confuse them further. Definitely.
Yeah.
So we then leave Roland and his quartet behind for almost the rest of this week's reading. And we go hang out with everyone's favorite were-spider, Mordred.
Very good.
We're going to hang out with him.
Excellent.
And I love how Stephen King sets the table for us here. What I'd show you is much more bizarre than anything we have looked at so far. And I'd warn you in advance that your first impulse will be to laugh. That's all right. Laugh if you must. Just don't take your eye off what you see. For even in your imagination, here is a creature which can do you damage. Remember that it came of two fathers, both of them killers. So we talked last week about how you thought, or you noticed, that King was kind of taking a more active role in his storytelling. He was doing the narrator asides a bit more, and he's always done them, but he's doing them a bit more in this book. And here's one of the most direct ones: is like we see the I statement, right? The first person statement. What I'd show you, I.
Yeah, and you. Yeah. It's amazing. I love the implication, or just the concept that this is going to be so fucking scary that it's going to harm you through the book. It's going to jump out of the book and into your mind. I love that.
Even in your imagination, here is a creature which can do you damage. Well, remember last week when we learned through the mind trap that your imagination can indeed hurt you.
Sure.
That was the physical manifestation of that. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's some monsters in fiction, and they can live in your head, right? Yeah.
So we meet Mordred really for the first time. And at this point in the story, he's now a 6-month-old baby and growing very quickly. And wait, did we say were-spider before? Because that's fucking right. Mordred isn't just a spider baby. He's a were-spider baby. And he just kind of hangs out in baby form, but transforms into creepy spider baby form when he feels like eating people. So there's that. That was new. I bet you didn't see that coming.
Did not. And, as with a few of the other elements in the story where this King has introduced something fantastical and then kind of gradually introduced us to the details, like with the doorways between worlds, where the number of rules and complexities and interesting situations that arise from the doors between worlds is amazing. Here again, King introduces us to this concept of the were-spiders, the physiology, the benefits and limitations. The spider is good at doing this kind of thing, but bad at doing this. The baby form is good at this, but bad at this. He does it all in such an organic and interesting way over the course of these pages that, you're just totally captivated by it. And it's just so fun.
Well, and it's so important too that we for a long time we've been talking about Mordred as this character that is, he's two different characters. He's Roland's son, he's the Crimson King's son. And then if he's born and then just transforms into the spider and now he's just spider baby the whole time, that kind of removes that twinning thing. But we're not doing that here. He's both. And he has different wants and needs and emotions that rise to the surface in these different forms, and that really informs who he is and what his internal struggle is, and it makes him such a more interesting character.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, at first he really just seemed like, he turned into a spider and now he's a monster, and it's so much more interesting than that. And I love this idea, we just kind of said he's got two fathers, he's got two mothers, and he's got two selves, basically. It's really cool.
It's twins again. So much twinning here.
Yep.
So we watch in horror as Mordred eats a billy bumbler that you might have thought was Oi for a second and had a panic attack and threw your book across the room and pledged never to read the series again. Oh, was that just me?
Oh, no, it wasn't just you. I had a horrible feeling of oh my God, no, this isn't how he does it. But no, of course it wasn't actually. But
imagine how pissed you'd be at Susanna if she didn't warn them about Mordred and then Oi got eated.
I know.
You just never forgive her. And that's why it couldn't be. It's just a random billy bumbler. Although it still does break your heart.
Yeah.
Because King is nice enough to flash back to Oi waking up from a nightmare as he feels the death of this random Billy Bumbler, which is just heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it's like a little baby Billy Bumbler, which would be even cuter.
Yeah.
Monster.
It's interesting that is how we're introduced to Mordred, the character, not Mordred, the plot device, as we saw him when he was first born, but Mordred, the character. The first thing he does is eat a Billy Bumbler and scare us into thinking it's Oi. And then King opens up on him a little bit. And it's so similar to what he did with Mia, right? Like, we were introduced to Mia. We saw Mia in her worst, most monstrous moment, which is like crawling around the swamp, eating frogs and bugs and anything she could find, and then in her mind just gorging herself in this giant palace. It's just disgusting. I think you called it one of the most horrifying things that you had read in the book at the time. And then King teaches you a little bit more about her, and you see the complexities of her, and then she ends up breaking your heart when she dies. And we do a very similar thing with Mordred here, because we move into we move from him eating the Bumbler into this passage right here. Now he watched them sleep. The boy Jake had awakened, but only briefly. Earlier, Mordred had watched them eat, 4 fools and a bumbler, full of energy, full of blood, dining in a circle together. Always they would sit in a circle. They would make that circle even when they stopped to rest 5 minutes on the trail, doing it without ever being aware of it. Their circle kept the rest of the world out. Mordred had no circle. Although he was new, he already understood that outside was his Ka, just as it was the Ka of winter's wind to swing through only half the compass, from north to east, and then back again to the bleak north once more. He accepted this, yet he still looked at them with the outsider's resentment, knowing he would hurt them and that satisfaction would be bitter. He was of 2 worlds, the foretold joining of Prim and Am, of Gadash and Godash, of Gon and Gilead. He was in a way like Jesus Christ, but in a way he was purer than the sheep god man, for the sheep god man had but one true father, who was in the highly hypothetical heaven, and a stepfather who was on earth. Poor old Joseph, who wore horns put on him by God himself. Mordred Deshane, on the other hand, had 2 real fathers, one of whom now slept on the screen before him. So we define this character as we said, a twin, and in fitting his twin, he has 2 sides. He has this love and this hate. The Prim and Am, the Gadash and Godash, Gon and Gilead. The 2 sides of this character that are pushing against each other. The resentful side and the love side. And I love this to go back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this episode. Love is a bigger driver of pain than hate sometimes, right? Like, what drives Mordred more in this book? Is it his hate for his father, or is it his love for his father?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, right? But I think that just in terms of the themes we're working with, like, I think maybe one reason why he's a more fitting antagonist than Walter O'Dim is that Walter O'Dim really is driven by hate and low Kamala, basically, whereas Mordred, he may have. I mean, I think the spider half of him is almost like low Kamala incarnate. Like, it's just primal desire to feed and hurt and kill. Like, that's it. The inner monologue of the spider, I remember being this amazing, like, just refrain of pointless violence. But he also has the capacity to actually love like the way Roland loves, you know. That's the dichotomy of Roland, is that he is this killer who's also a romantic. And I think that's kind of the same dichotomy we're seeing in Mordred, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I love that, like, we talked a lot about what Stephen King defines evil as through the lens of his monsters. And I think Mordred represents one of the most fascinating depictions of that lens, is the evil that you want to, sometimes we want to pigeonhole evil into just the monster spider baby, right? Like, it would be so much easier if all evil in this world was just that. But it's not always. And you have a character like this that represents these 2 opposing seemingly sides, but that are still together creating this monster who ate a fucking Billy Bumbler. And so we hate him. And it's just, Mordred is King's concept of evil made manifest, I think.
Yeah. or the concept of evil, or the concept of the human struggle with evil in a monster form, in a in the genre trope fashion that we love. Before we move on from this moment here with eating the Billy Bumbler, I wanted to just mention how it's interesting how many parts of the series actually, how many of the most horrifying parts of the series have involved like eating flesh. Like we had Mia crawling around eating gross things, and then maybe eating a baby. That was a horrifying moment. Here we have Mordred eating a cute Billy Bumbler, and then eating a few people in the course of this, a couple of people so far. And I'm trying to think if there was one. I feel like there was another example. I mean, the door monster, the Dixie Pig eating people, vampires eating people. The door monster kind of tried to eat Jake, but I feel like it mainly just wanted to kill him. But yeah, anyway, just the kind of the visceral horror of having human flesh be eaten, having your flesh be eaten, or like just the idea of eating gross things is really a heavy drum throughout this whole thing. I wonder if is this just a thing that King uses a lot, or do you think he's using it an unusual amount in the Dark Tower based on your knowledge?
Oh gosh. I mean, he's definitely used devouring imagery in the past. I mean, it is such a carnal thing, right? It is such a base, like animalistic instinct. Like everyone has to eat, and to take one of the most basic things we do and turn it into this disgusting version of itself, I think is what he does. I mean, he does it with, we've talked so much about how he does it with sex, right?
Yeah.
He does it like he takes this basic innate human thing and twists it and turns it until it's disgusting and horrifying. And I think it is part of what he enjoys is doing that thing, is taking that turn, making the most relatable into the most horrifying.
Yes, I love that. That's amazing.
All right, so let's wrap up this chapter with a fun little quote here. Look, if you would. Here sits a baby with blood streaking his fair skin. Here sits a baby weeping his silent, eerie tears. Here sits a baby that knows both too much and too little. And although we must keep our fingers away from his mouth, he snaps, this one, snaps like a baby crocodile. We are allowed to pity him a little. If Ka is a train, and it is, a vast, hurtling mono, maybe sane, maybe not, then this nasty little lycanthrope is the most vulnerable hostage, not tied to the tracks like little Nell, but strapped to the thing's very headlight. It's fascinating the way in which King freely takes his antagonist and just says, look, this person doesn't have any control over this either. Like, if we live in a world in which Ka exists, as you were, and this is exactly what you were talking about earlier, it all connects together. If every good thing that happens to our characters is the will of Ka, then the same must be true on the other side.
Yeah.
Then every evil person in this story, every antagonist, everything that horrifies us and makes us hate it must also be part of the same force.
Yeah.
It's this eternal struggle that I found, especially like in my growing up Catholic days, of trying to understand the wonder and yet the terror of what existence on this planet is like. Like, being a human being on Earth, you're witness to some of the most shockingly terrible people and things and events, things that don't make sense, things that don't seem to align with anything, that don't fall into a nice little story. How does that work? And King is looking at that concept and taking it head on. If you love Roland, if you love Jake, if you love Eddie, and you are horrified by the things that they are forced to do or forced to have happen to them, you have to feel the same way for the things that are put in their path.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a baby, right? Like, it's a monster, but is it it didn't choose to be a monster. It just got born and happened to suddenly have the psychic knowledge of the Crimson King foisted upon it. Right. So, like, in a sense, it's just as much a victim, and it's probably going to get up to some heinous shit soon. Right. But like, in a very real sense, and the book is even going out of its way to tell us this, like it is a victim. It has no control. And to tell a good story, it's probably going to have some horrible fate. Yeah, I mean, I think that just like Mia, you know, his mother, who's passing, we just witnessed, Mordred is being set up as a creature who we pity despite his evil because we understand his evil.
Yeah, and King's inviting you to do that, right? Like, again, he's talking directly to us, the reader. Look, if you would. We must keep our fingers away from his house, but we are allowed to pity him a little. Like, he's giving you permission. He's giving you permission to say, I kind of feel bad for this little baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay to feel bad for it. And I think it's so wonderful because he's pulling and pushing at you that way. Like I said, we opened this chapter with him eating a Billy Bumbler, a thing directly related to one of our favorite, most adorable characters in this novel. And Stephen King knows that. And so he's trying to challenge you on this. He's trying to, like, what is pity, right? To fall back into Tolkienism. Like, what is pity, and how does pity manifest itself? And what do we do? How do we slot this character in our file of good versus evil? You know?
Yeah, right. I mean, you want to confront some complicated emotions. Go look at the YouTube videos of the tiger shark fetuses eating each other in the womb.
Oh my god.
Because you're like, well, that's fucked up. But then you're like, but they literally haven't even been born yet. So they're just executing a program. Mm-hmm. So like you feel like it fills you with so many conflicting feelings of like, I want to say these things are monsters, but they're just doing what they do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting how we it's so difficult. It's so complicated, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah. They're just riding on Ka's headlight.
Yeah.
And I mean,
exactly.
I think the most important thing here is that he says you're allowed to pity him a little. Like, you don't just say, oh, Mordred gets a free pass because he's not in control. No, that's not how this works. Obviously, if he's going to try to kill our main characters, like we want him gone.
Right.
But that doesn't mean like you need to like have a party when and if that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like with Mia, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And isn't that such a more interesting story? Wasn't the story of Mia as a poor mother who just wanted to experience this love that she would never get to experience? Isn't that so much more impactful than Scary Monster Lady?
And the thing about Mia is Mia was a legitimate murder creature from the primordial darkness, who just like saw a beautiful child and completely changed and sort of tried to become something in the light, right? And it just didn't work out for her. And just the fact that she sort of tried made us sympathize with her.
Right. I mean, it's her. I think, trying to do that was her resisting Discordia a little bit, right? Like she was a creature of the Prim that became a person, that became mortal, that became existence. You can call it order if you want, like the opposite of Discord, if you want to. But and the evil forces of this world seized upon that and used it to destroy her.
Yeah.
And I mean, and as we'll see, like that's one thing that, I mean, we're going to get into it here in a bit because we get a lot of lore in this next chapter, but we haven't gotten a really clear understanding on what the hell Mordred was supposed to do. Like why was it so important for Mordred to exist? I mean, we kind of just assumed it was, so he can kill Roland. They need something to kill Roland. But like, that doesn't quite check out because Walter's had plenty of opportunities to kill Roland in the past. It wasn't just about killing him. It was something more. And we finally get to learn what that is here.
Yeah. All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's jump into chapter 3, The Shining Wire. And oh boy, Matt, there's so much to talk about in this chapter. This is the longest chapter of this week's reading, and I think it's going to be our longest conversation because, oh boy. Mordred wakes up from his nappy nap and finds that Nigel, the jolly old robot, has died, which is sad. But that's okay because Mordred has a new friend. He saw a man in blue jeans and a hooded parka standing on the gray tiles of the control center. His gunna, nothing more than a beat-up duffel bag, lay at his feet. His cheeks were flushed, his face handsome, his eyes burning hot. In his hand was an automatic pistol, and as he looked into the dark eyes of its muzzle, Mordred Deshane for the second time realized that even gods could die once their divinity had been diluted with human blood. And so this is Walter O'Dim, the Man in Black, the Walking Dude, Randall Flagg, Martin Broadcloak, the Ageless Stranger, does all the names, and it's here. He's here.
He's finally here.
Yeah.
It's going to be epic.
It is. Sort of. So Walter is wearing what he calls a thinking cap, which protects him from Mordred's psychic powers. Except, well, it doesn't.
Uh-huh.
That's the first moment of this chapter, is Walter being so sure that he's safe from what Mordred can do, and the text immediately telling us, no. Did the man really believe that the thinking cap had closed off his thoughts? Mordred looked closer, pried deeper, and saw the answer was yes. Very convenient.
It's so great. God, the setup of the scene is so amazing. I love everything about this. So also there's this interesting implication in what you just read, that Walter isn't here of his own free will. And I guess we're meant to infer that like the Crimson King caused him to be here, or is not Mordred, right? Like Mordred didn't reach out for him. Am I missing? The text doesn't tell us, does it?
It does not. I mean,
Okay.
I think the tragedy of Walter O'Dim is that he is so convinced he's running his own scam the entire time, and he is just as much of a slave to Ka as everyone else is. And
he may literally be like a puppet of the Crimson King, like telepathically controlled by him, even in some cases.
But I think that the fascinating thing is we open this chapter, and this is our guy. This is the Man in Black. The opening line of our statement, of our whole story. The Man in Black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed him. And we see here at the very beginning of this chapter that he's fucked. We're not going to get to his death for a while. But King has already established that in this whole engagement between the new antagonist and the old antagonist, the old one is so out of his league. And I think it's such a great tool to me, because a lot of what this chapter is doing is reducing the idea of who the Man in Black was to the most accurate level. And I don't think you would be as susceptible to pick up on that reduction if it didn't start with the book declaring him outmatched from the beginning. Yeah,
you'd be expecting it to be kind of a back and forth, a jockeying, and in fact it's just like no, he's already checkmated. He's just not aware of it yet, and that, if anything, shows you how out of his depth he is, that he's just babbling on when he's already dead, basically.
Yeah, because the reveal of this chapter is that he's kind of just like a loser.
He's not as knowledgeable as he thinks. He's surprisingly been reliant on luck in times when we thought that he was so clever. He's not particularly driven by dignified motives beyond just the motive to get to the tower. He even admits that some of his more mysterious feats have been parlor tricks, as we'll see. And like the whole thing, you're just like, oh, this isn't who I thought it was.
Yeah. It's such an interesting move, and I want to talk about his death when we get there a lot, because I think there's a lot to say there. But just the idea that we're going to take this character and reduce him, that we're like, this is not something that sits right in a lot of readers, but I do think it's a really fascinating choice, and we'll get there. But first, we learn that the reason Walter is here is that there are only two creatures capable of unlocking the door at the foot of the tower, the Dark Tower, and that little Mordred Deshane is one of them. It was a dangerous game, agreed, but now there were only two creatures who could unlock the door at the foot of the tower before the tower fell, which it would, and soon, because the writer had only days left to live in his world, and the final books of the tower, 3 of them, remained unwritten. In the last one that was written in the Key World, Roland's quartet had banished Cyrandi Flagg from a dream place on an interstate highway, a palace that had looked to Eddie, Susanna, and Jake like the castle of Oz the Great and Terrible. Oz the Green King, may it do you fine. They had, in fact, almost killed that bad old bumhug Walter O'Dim, thereby providing what some would no doubt call a happy ending. But beyond page 676 of Wizard and Glass, not a word about Roland and the Dark Tower had Stephen King written, and Walter considered that the real happy ending.
But what does he think is happening now?
Well, that's where we get into our whole chicken and egg situation.
Yes,
right?
I don't think that I don't need an answer to that. I'm just like, what the hell? What? Anyway, this is great. I love that we're just completely acknowledging that basically Walter has read the existing Dark Tower books. I mean, there's no other interpretation, right?
Yeah, well, he knows there's 3 left. And then he talks about Wolves of the Calla as if he's read it. He talks about Song of Susanna as if he's read it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
it puts an interesting cast on the way that he's always kind of like smug and like acts like he knows so much. It's like, well, he just read the book.
Well, but it's so interesting, right? Because you were talking about like metagaming and arguably that is Walter's whole deal. But he's been wrong time and time again. Like we've seen him be wrong. It's like, this will stop him. Like I'm going to put you, Per Callahan, in the way. I'm going to bring you to the Calla, and you're going to lead to their downfall. Nope. Wrong again. Right. And you wonder, is this just his ignorance, or is he totally aware that that's not actually going to stop him, but he's still going to keep playing his part? Like, obviously he hasn't read this book because he would know he's about to die.
Yeah. Well, I think this book hasn't, I think he really believes this book hasn't been written and it won't be written, which is confusing, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I think that he just is not as smart as we have kind of always given him credit for. And when he thinks to himself, like, I'm going to put the pair in their path and he's going to stop them, he's never at any point considering, like, what if all I've done is provided them a character who, you know, resonates with them in different ways and then ends up getting a wonderful redemption scene while having served a vital role in actually helping them. Like he doesn't, I don't think he understands Ka, basically.
Look, man, it's like when your boss hands you an assignment and you're like doing the assignment and you're like, I think I know what he wants to do with this. And then you turn it in and he does something completely else with it. And you're just like, oh.
Yeah.
Did I screw up? Was that my bad?
Yeah. Thanks for the flashbacks there, Scott. I appreciate that.
I'm so sorry. I forgot that exact thing happened to you many, many times.
Of course, yes. Like 2 different times flashed through my head as you were talking. But go on. Let's go on with our lighthearted podcast, Scott.
We learn here that, like Roland, Walter has spent his entire existence looking for the tower, longing for the tower. He's as much of a tower addict as Roland is. And he wants to go there now. He wants to open the door, climb to the top, bypass the trapped Red King, and become, quote, the god of all. I didn't know that would do that. And I don't think he knows it either, right?
I don't think he knows. I mean, I think that it's a mystery, right? It's that, like, Roland is like, well, I want to see what, if anything, sits there and then try to understand what it means.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Red King, Matt. So we've just gotten confirmation here that the Red King is one of the 2 people that can open the door to the tower, but he's already in there. He's already in there. He's trapped in the tower, as Walter says here. He's gone mad. It's speculated because of his proximity to the tower or how much he's been thinking about it. Like, there's this huge nexus of everything might drive a person mad if you hang out with it for too long. And he's also called the Spider King. And he's got the same birthmark as little Mordred. So what's the deal with this guy, Matt? What's the Red King? Is it just a spider?
Well, I mean, I would be surprised if he didn't also have some spider powers.
What's a spider power? Like Spider-Man? Like he's got spider sense?
Yeah, shoot webs out of his, wrists. And no, like I think maybe he's also a lycanthrope, or whatever word we're going to use. I mean, he seems like incredibly psychic, like just absurdly, ridiculously psychic relative to other things that we've met, like Jake, for example. And maybe he can turn into a spider too. Maybe he is a spider. I don't get the impression that he's just always a spider, because I feel like we would have heard about that by now.
I can't get the image in my head of him web slinging around the Dark Tower.
Just like doing loops.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else to web onto, so he just spins around it. Yeah. That's I can't wait for that scene to happen. It's going to be great.
Yeah, so I mean, he's such an interesting, like, imagine if Gandalf was like, "Oh yeah, but Sauron, he's just kind of crazy."
Yeah.
which he is.
Yeah, I mean, he's just an eye, right? Like, like he literally is just an eye. We're not even like, he can't do anything. He's just an eye with a will. So yeah, it could be way weirder than I'm imagining, I guess. Is I just don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe he is a giant spider. Maybe he's just a giant spider who psychically tells people to do things, and that's how he does his thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I read Lord of the Rings, I gotta say, when they said the Eye of Sauron, I don't think I ever expected it to just literally be. I thought they were like speaking metaphorically, but it was just a big old eye.
I think I may have felt the same when I read the books, although I think the other material makes it apparent that yes, his body was destroyed and he actually did just become an eye.
And then in the movie, it's like a searchlight.
Yeah, which works really well cinematically. Yes,
sure, I understand the need for it, but I mean, the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, that's a little silly.
Really? See, I thought it looked cool, but I it's hard for me to get to a place where I can think ill thoughts of Lord of the Rings.
I just like when the ring drops in, it like is like frantically looking around.
Yeah.
It's just really funny. I don't know. Look, I love the movies. I will not speak ill of those movies. They're great, but I don't know. Maybe the Red King's a fucking spider eye. Who knows?
And when it's falling and it's looking around like the shoe and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, he's getting dipped into the dip. Yes.
God, what a pull.
Yeah, it had the same energy. It's filed same right next to each other.
Cartoon shoe.
Cartoon CGI thing that can't talk being killed slowly in front of you, I think, is the filing cabinet.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that the real victim in Lord of the Rings was Sauron.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, that's before. So the two beings that can enter the Dark Tower. I think maybe we're supposed to just kind of assume that it's Roland, but I'm also wondering if that's not a misfire and it could be someone else on the quartet. Like Eddie is the one who can open doors. You know, he's the key maker.
Sure. I memean, it mentions that he needs the birthmark leg for that, right? Like that's what the birthmark symbolizes.
So is the implication that the only people who can open the tower are the Crimson King and Mordred?
It seems like it.
Okay. I sure, fine. Okay.
I don't think the book has said that definitively, but I mean, you can. Here's what it says. It says Walter is going to kill Mordred, rip off the leg with the birthmark on it, and take that to the tower. He needs that to get to the tower and get inside. Then it says that birthmark is matched by the Crimson King. So I feel like that's a leap you can make, although it hasn't said it definitively. So maybe not. I don't know. Of
course, he's wrong. He's wrong because it's actually the hourglass that he needs. But yes, anyway.
So then we get to this part where Walter O'Dim declares his loyalty formally to Mordred. Hail, Mordred Deshane, son of Roland of Gilead that was, and of the Crimson King whose name was once spoken from Endworld to Outworld. Hail, you son of two fathers, both of them descended from Arthur Eld, first king to rise after the Prim receded, and guardian of the Dark Tower. So that's a whole lot of new information.
Yeah, guardian of the Dark Tower.
Yeah,
Gilead
Arthur.
Being super, like, almost primordially ancient. Lots of stuff in there.
But the Crimson King comes from the same line as Roland too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Mordred is about to find out that he is his own grandpa.
I told you there was going to be time travel and self-parenthood.
I love this. It's fascinating here. So son of Roland that was, and of the Crimson King whose name was once spoken from Endworld to Outworld. And it's so fascinating to me that, like, in this chapter, we're reducing our villains again. We're reducing Walter O'Dim, and we're saying that the Crimson King has been reduced as well. Like once upon a time, everyone from Endworld to Outworld spoke the name of the Crimson King, but not anymore. It's like this last little band of folks that are still being annoying, right? Like they've still been a thorn in the side of our characters, but the world has moved on in every conceivable way. And the power of the Crimson King is also not as strong as it once was.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, he clearly still has enough control over like this prison and the breakers and so forth. But yeah, I mean, definitely the agents of the Crimson King we've seen so far in this book have seemed pretty incompetent and easily dispatched.
It's that damn bureaucracy, man.
Yeah. It'll get you every time, man.
That's what happens when you spend all your day in a tower and don't like go check up on your people.
Yeah, that's like bad management.
It's like a Trump metaphor here somehow.
I get it. Okay. Yeah.
So Walter goes on talking, eventually telling Mordred exactly what happened back in the Gunslinger. So Matt, you remember when Roland saw the tower and then woke up and found all these bones of the man in black waiting for him? And we were like, well, how can that be? Because he's not really dead, is he? Well, I think at the time we had a big like conversation about the mystical nature of all this stuff, but it was just a trick. It was just a magic trick.
Yeah.
Like Walter just took a bunch of bones and dressed them in his clothing while Roland was hypnotized.
Yeah, and then ran away naked, I assume.
Yeah, and it's such a fascinating character choice here, Matt, because the man in black was always a bit silly, right? Like from the beginning, he was a bit silly. Our introduction to him as a character is him like spitting on a corpse and then like jackknifing over it really fast until he comes back to life. And now I kind of wonder how much of that was literally just showmanship and had nothing to do with the actual power that brought what's his name back.
Yeah.
It's probably just him fucking around because he thought it was funny.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the dude was just like gonna come back to life anyway.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, like what have we really seen him do? What has he really done to our characters? Other than, you know, show up in unexpected places, which here we're finding out just like, oh, he just knows that there's a trap door.
Right. I mean, that's such a perfect metaphor for who he is, right? That like, it's just a magician. He's just a magician. Yeah. Like everything's just tricks. And I mean, he has some magic, presumably. He did bring a dude back to life. We have to conclude that he did something magical there, but maybe not. I don't know. But like most of his magic is just tricks.
Yeah. I mean, I think the favorite thing he says in all of this is like, when Roland caught me on the edge of the desert, I thought I was done for. And that's so funny because in that scene, he gives this impression of being so utterly in control and fearless.
Oh, yeah.
And you realize like, oh, Roland totally could have killed him there. He just was lucky, basically. And you know, successfully pulled the wool over his eyes. It's funny because at the time, I had this impression that when Roland like fired and like missed every shot, I had the impression that that Walter had done some magic, and now I'm like, maybe he was just missing on purpose because he wanted to question him more than he wanted to kill him. You know, I don't know. Anyway, it's just like this has caused me to reevaluate like every scene that Walter O'Dim has showed up in. So
yeah, I mean, it has to. It absolutely has to, because you're right. He has been portrayed throughout the story as the person in complete control. The arrogance with which he dealt with Roland in the Gunslinger was so apparent, right? He's standing there. He says to him before they even go into the tunnel, only one of you's coming out, right? Like, I know you're going to sacrifice Jake to get to me. I know you're going to do it. He comes off as utterly assured, utterly confident, knows exactly what's going to happen. And maybe he does. Maybe he's got some insider info. But we see that was part of the illusion, that perhaps he wasn't 100% sure. Like, it's like you have a copy of the script, but you don't know if there are any last minute changes that someone wrote in the margins, you know? And so like, he knows that in this part of the story, Roland allows Jake to fall and die, but like, maybe he didn't. And he plays off the confidence in order to kind of push him towards it, but maybe he doesn't really know 100% sure. And it's a fascinating like takedown of a character who seemed so menacing, so all powerful, so in control the entire time.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And we learn here that as much as like his lust for the tower drives him, his hatred seems to drive him a little bit more. For the long and dusty leagues he's chased me, for all the trouble he's caused me, and for the Red King as well, the true king, Yadu Ken, for his presumption in refusing to give over his quest no matter what obstacles were placed in his path, most of all, for the death of his mother, whom I once loved, and, in an undertone, or at least coveted. In either case, it was he who killed her. No matter what part I or Rhea of the Coos may have played in that matter, it was the boy himself who stopped her breath with his damned guns, slow head, and quick hands. Oof.
Yeah. I don't know. It felt to me like he's sort of reaching for reasons to hate Roland. Like he definitely hates him, but it's interesting. I wonder, like, does this guy really care about anything enough to muster up like a good solid hate?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that the sentence that sticks out most to me is that most of all for the death of his mother, whom I once loved, or at least coveted, right? So like he starts off saying the thing that I hate him for most is he took my love away from me, but he can't say that without clarifying it, right? Like it's such a fascinating choice. Like he could just say it and then you and I would be having a conversation about, did he really mean that? Does he really think he loved her? And instead King has him like basically clarify or at least coveted.
Right. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
So like, I mean, maybe he had feelings for her. Like it's very possible he did, that this wasn't just part of a long plan to fuck over Roland's father, although it seems like part of it. But maybe he had the hots for her a little bit. I don't know. Yeah.
Another thing that jumps out to me about this bit is like it's so evident now that he read the books, because he's like his damn guns, slow head, and quick hands. Like the only reason he knows what actually happened and why Rhea of the Coos was involved is because he read the book. There's no other way he could know that, right?
Yeah,
he fucking read the book and he saw what happened, and now he's using King's way of describing Roland with his slow head and quick hands and all this, and it's like, yeah, this dude read the books, man, and hates the protagonist.
Yeah, I mean, when you are the antagonist, it is kind of your lot in life to hate the protagonist.
Yeah, he's just he just needed to follow that thought to its logical conclusion, though.
Yeah. Of course, the thing that we know is that all the time, he talks about how impressive and amazing he is and tricky he is. Mordred is just rooting around in his head. And then there's this wonderful moment. For the third and last time, Mordred drew the shape of a question in the air. That's our wonderful 3-beat there, our 3-beat that seals the fate of Walter O'Dim. And there's a phrase, the elephant in the living room, which purports to describe what it's like to live with a drug addict, an alcoholic, an abuser. People outside such relationships will sometimes ask, how could you let such a business go on for so many years? Didn't you see the elephant in the living room? And it's so hard for anyone living in a more normal situation to understand the answer that comes closest to the truth. I'm sorry, but it was there when I moved in. I didn't know it was an elephant. I thought it was part of the furniture. There comes an aha moment for some folks, the lucky ones, when they suddenly recognize the difference. And that moment came for Walter. It came too late, but not by much. I don't know, man. These are the little bits and pieces of Stephen King's writing that I love. This is a completely anachronistic aside that King is talking directly to us, probably from experience with the people he loved and the stories he's heard in recovery. And it just slots perfectly into this moment of, oops, I fucked up.
Yeah. Yep. I all the pieces really do come together there.
Yeah.
It's the idea of introducing the concept of the elephant in the room here is very, very interesting. Because it's like it's not necessarily about an addictive situation, right? But
No.
but it is about the feeling. I don't know. I think that King is placing this idea here so that he can use it later. Maybe not explicitly refer to the idea of the elephant in the living room, but the idea of a bad behavior in our characters that we've overlooked because we thought it was part of the furniture. But yeah, no, I love the whole paragraph. It's so interesting, and you can just like every sentence you just kind of want to read slowly and absorb.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I think this is a concept we've been dealing with throughout the books, and I think King putting terms to it that he doesn't have to directly reference in the future, but he's put it in your brain.
Yeah,
definitely purposeful. So what happens next is a shining wire that is the title of this chapter, and a Watership Down reference, as King lets us know, extends from Mordred to Flag, wrapping around him and locking him into place. Flag realizes that his thinking cap, which comes from French Landing, Wisconsin, which is another reference to the novel Black House, which is a King story that is tangentially related to the Dark Tower, isn't working. So that's just a fun throwaway reference for you, Matt, that maybe one day we'll talk about.
Awesome.
So now I do the one you call my white father a small favor. You may not have been his greatest enemy, Walter Paddock, as you were called when you set out in the long ago, but you were his oldest, I grant, and now I take you out of his road. So we learn his true name, Walter Paddock, right? Such a normal name for like a normal kid who grew up on a farm. We learn he was the son of a miller. He was just a person, and here in his end, we see him as just a person, Walter Paddock.
Yeah, a victim in his own way, right?
Yeah.
The audiobook, I heard it as Paddock, Paddock, like the farming idea, which is an even more kind of undignified name because it's just like, oh, he's a farm boy, he's lit.
Yeah.
And probably where King got the name from anyway. And yeah, it's like, God, that's the thing is, I didn't quite see this way before, but even the Man in Black, the great villain of the story, the King goes out of his way to be like, hey, feel a little sting of pity for this guy before and then the way he dies, let's just get into that. Cause that's, if you didn't feel any pity at all during this, I mean, he's a bad guy and he deserves it, but also it's just like, okay, all right, please just let him die. Just end it,
Yeah, he makes him rip his eyes out and feed them to Mordred. Then he makes him rip his tongue out and feed it to Mordred, slowly, bit by bit. It's awful. It's awful.
Yeah, and then finally, finishes him off, right?
Yeah, with the taste of blood in his mouth, all interest in foreplay departed Mordred. He was reduced to his central core, which was mostly appetite. He pounced upon Randall Flagg, Walter O'Dim, Walter Paddock that was. There were more screams, but only a few. And then Roland's old enemy was no more. And that's it. There's the death of Randall Flagg, the death of the Man in Black who fled across the desert all those pages ago. He's gone like he was nothing, really. No great confrontation with Roland at the end of this long series that spanned Stephen King's life. Roland doesn't get to defeat his old enemy. He's just gone without him even knowing it. What do you think about this, Matt?
I think it fits in really well with the idea that evil destroys itself. The Man in Black wants to kill Mordred and use his dead body for his own purposes. Mordred kills the Man in Black and uses his dead body for his own purposes. Like, once again, they're both seeing each other as flesh. Just like we were talking about, the idea of eating flesh comes up again, and both of them are just the kind of villain who looks at a person and just sees meat, right? That's the kind of villain that they are, and so it's fitting that this is how he dies. It's really a rather perfect type of conflict, I think, to lead to the death of this particular character. And like you were saying, he was kind of nothing. Like what did he really do other than lurk in the background and be worrying presence?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he kind of, what he mostly does is kind of help out Roland.
Yeah.
Like, here's your quest. Here's what you need to know.
Uh-huh.
I also packed some sandwiches for you.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. Here's a Catholic priest. He'll be a thorn in your side. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, a part of me might have wanted Flag to turn out to be more like, Joker, Chris Nolan Joker, like this kind of supernatural primal force of chaos. But like that's not what King is doing with this character or this book, nor is it how he thinks. Like we talk plenty about the types of evil, and
Sure.
Flag is like the dumb, pointless destruction kind of evil. He's like there's no complicated method behind that. There's not supposed to be. It's short-sighted. It's selfish. Generally, it gets the end that it deserves eventually.
Yeah, there is an argument to be made here that this ending of this major character, and I think the thing that we should say here is, for constant readers, Randall Flagg is not just a character that appeared a few times in this story. He's a character that has appeared again and again and again throughout Stephen King's expanded universe. He is a big presence in The Stand, in The Eye of the Dragon. He's smaller presences and felt in a bunch of different stories. He's been around and he's done a lot of things, and he's been characterized differently depending on the story. It depends. And so there is a certain view of this that says this is like the bad guy that expands across Stephen King's universe, and what we're going to do to him in King's magnum opus, the final book of his magnum opus, is we're going to take him down a peg. We're going to make him shitty. We're going to reveal him to just be a simple man that got in over his head, that got wound up in Ka and this whole big thing, and then is unceremoniously yanked from it. And I think there's a version of a reader of the story, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this, that feels gypped that he didn't get to have a final gunfight or confrontation or whatever you want to call it with his original enemy, with Roland Deschain. That this antagonist of the Stephen King universe wasn't defeated by the protagonist of the Stephen King universe. I get that sentiment. I totally get it. And there's part of me that goes, yeah, that would have been fucking cool. But I do think you are exactly on point here, that while this death is not perhaps narratively satisfying, or as narratively satisfying as it could be, I think it is very thematically satisfying. I think it is very wound up in everything that King is trying to do with the story. And I do think when people talk about endings in Stephen King, they're often disappointed by the lack of narrative satisfaction, even though it has tons of thematic satisfaction.
Yeah, that's interesting. I again haven't read that much Stephen King, but I do find that when people criticize the way things end, very often it is kind of from a place of being like, well, that didn't follow the tropes that I thought we were following, and and I think and I think sometimes, I mean, every reaction is valid in its own way, but I think
Sure.
that like if you think that The Dark Tower, or for another comparison, Song of Ice and Fire is like of the shonen protagonist is going to kick everyone's ass.
Did you just make a fucking anime reference?
I made an anime reference because it's the name of the thing, right? It's like the point of this is that the protagonist is awesome and they're going to win, and they're going to have a big fight with the bad guy, right? And it's like, well, that if you're thinking it's going to be shonen, you're going to be super disappointed when it really, really is not. Now, I'm not, there's all sorts of different tropes that people might latch onto and like think, oh, this is what's going to happen. This is the direction we're going, and then be wrong because the author has some other intent in mind. And I never really saw Walter O'Dim as the kind of character who would ever get into a gunfight with Roland, because it's like I don't even know if he can shoot.
Yeah, I mean, he's carrying a gun in the scene, but have we ever seen him use a gun? Like, ever?
No, I don't think so. No, he usually just kind of sets people up, and Yeah, I mean,
I also don't know what that gunfight looks like. Like, I mean, were they just gonna stand far apart from each other and shoot at each other for a couple pages and then Roland wins?
I think I think the generous thing where you're like, okay, well, what else would you imagine is like, well, at least a conversation.
Sure.
They talk about, the road has been long, Roland, but finally the Ka has placed you in my path, and now I will destroy you. And then Roland says some quip, and then they fight, and then Roland wins because that's how that always, that's how that would go. And it's like, well, that's sure. That you King could probably write that in a way that was satisfying and fun too. I just think this works, like we've said several times now, like this works better thematically as a way of talking about the nature of evil and Ka and who this character is and all these other ideas.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think there is some poetic bits to Roland's son, like vanquishing his father's oldest enemy, right? I think that is there are some traditional tropiness along that line, that this is my father's enemy and I will take him out. I will do it for him. So yeah, I mean, it's complex, it's complicated. And I just want to reiterate that I totally get people that came out of this death and were like, man, that's disappointing. This is the fucking walking dude. And this is how he goes. But I don't know. And I think one cool thing is you are kind of divorced from that because your interaction with this character is so limited. Because I think the thing that I noticed more than anything on this read through is how little the Man in Black is actually in this story.
Yeah. It's
like barely any.
Yeah.
Like, I think the book he is in the most is the shortest book in the series, which is The Gunslinger.
Yeah. This makes me really interested to read The Stand just to see like, well, who is he really like in a story where he is apparently more central? Because I've heard that he's a more central antagonist in that story. And I'm curious because I feel like I don't know him that well. We, like you said, we haven't spent that much time with him actually.
Well, tune in for season 2. All right, let's move on. We end this chapter, Mordred, because Walter was a quote-unquote quasi-immortal, which King says a phrase at least as foolish as most unique, which is a really wonderful turn of phrase that I liked. So Walter is a quasi-immortal, and everybody knows when you suck the life essence out of a quasi-immortal, you get a lot of power, right? That's just basic rules of
it's just
anything.
Math. It's just math, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's power units, and he's got an excess of power units. And so he uses that to leave his little control room behind, and he chases after the Katet. He gets to the Thunderclap door, and he decides, I'm going to chill here. I'm going to chill. And our chapter ends with, he could wait, felt no deep need beyond the eagerness of a child that wants everything and wants it now. Certainly he didn't suffer the bright intensity of Walter's hate. His own feelings were more complex, tinctured by sadness and loneliness, and yes, he'd do better to admit it. Love.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So interesting. So, setting up this new antagonist, but making us feel really complicated about it.
Yes. And going metatextual here at the end of the story, this portion of the story, rather, Mordred's defeat of Walter is almost as if to say, the enemy that is complicated is better than the enemy that is boring and simple and plain. Like plain hate can never stand up to the power. That's the power of love.
That's right.
And that's a perfect capper on this ongoing beat of these chapters, right? Because that's what, from the very first sentence of this week's reading, we were told how powerful love is. How powerful is love? How powerful is the driving force that love can be? Well, you can even defeat old Randy Flagg.
Yeah.
He's nothing.
Because he doesn't love anything.
No.
And he's not a spider monster.
Okay. That's a pretty key part of it. Yes. The whole where spider part has pretty important.
And he's not incredibly psychic, but mainly doesn't have love though.
It's mainly love.
Main thing.
All right, let's move on to chapter 4, titled The Door into Thunderclap. This is another pretty brief chapter. The last couple weeks, we've had a really short chapter to end our week's reading on. this one is kind of important for moving our characters into places and getting ready for the next portion of the story. So we're back with Roland and his quartet. We've kind of moved slightly back into the past. This is after they've woken up and are going to head out. So little baby Mordred still sleeping, hasn't killed Randy yet. And I want to talk about this part right here. How heavy am I, sugar? Susanna asked Eddie cheerfully. Or maybe what I should ask is, how bad you missing that good old wheelchair? Not to mention the shoulder rig. Suze, you hated that piggyback rig from the word go, and we both knew it. Wasn't asking about that, and you know it. It always fascinated Roland when Detta crept unheard into Susanna's voice, or, even more spooky, her face. The woman herself seemed unaware of these incursions, as her husband did now. So, Detta's
still around?
Yeah, I mean, remember when Susanna kind of speculated that the reason Detta came back was to help defeat Mia? This new presence invaded her body, and she needed the strength of Detta to defeat her. But she didn't leave afterwards, and that lends to the argument that no, Detta never left. You just thought she did, Susanna. You just didn't notice.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I really feel like we're going to continue playing with this idea of what exactly is going on with Susanna's personalities. What is Detta's maybe real function?
Yeah.
I still don't accept your answer about the blue lady. Honestly, I'm still waiting for that to be explained by the book. So
okay. Yeah, I mean, we're in the portion of the story now where we can start thinking about what do these characters look like when they finish their arc, right? And what does Susanna's arc look like at the end of her road? Obviously, it's going to center around the parts of her. She is the lady of shadows. She's got these multiple shadows within her.
Yeah.
And so it's going to center around this stuff. And so I think King is just reminding us, this is not something that was ever solved as cleanly as we thought it was. And that continues to be true even now.
Yeah.
So after they pack up, they got to figure out where to go, because it turns out this building's pretty big and they don't know where to go. And I love this moment where everyone turns to Roland here. And with that, all three of them again looked at Roland. No, make it 4, because even the god's cursed bumbler was staring. Eddie would have made a joke to dispel any discomfort he felt at such a combined stare, and Roland actually fumbled for one. Something about how too many eyes spoiled the pie, maybe? No, that saying, which he'd heard from Susanna, was about cooks and broth. I love Roland.
Yeah, I would love to see Roland attempt to joke and just totally confuse everyone.
Yeah.
Roland, you okay? Yeah, no, it's funny. Roland being goofy and fish out of water is always appreciated.
Yeah, but Roland is the consummate leader. Like he's the din of the group, and now they all turn and are like, Roland, where do we go? And he's frustrated with them. Even the god's cursed bumbler was staring, he says.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wonder, Roland is, I think this is a symbol or a hint that Roland's a little in over his head here. And I think one of the things I really want to point out when we get to it is I think Roland is just wrong about Jake, and in a very important way. And I think this is part of what is leading up to that. This idea that, everyone constantly turns to Roland, needs to be led by Roland, expects Roland to know where to go, how to do it. And with good reason. In the past, he has always kind of been like, well, it's obvious we do this thing now. It's obvious we go here. But he's a little in and over his head now. Things are happening very quickly. He's very close to the end, and he's not sure what to do anymore.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm kind of waiting for your comment about him being wrong about Jake to be resolved.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. I think you're right though. I think he's got, he's the dog chasing the car who has either caught the car or is about to catch the car and is realizing that he doesn't actually know what to do now. I like this vision of Roland as like, oh, I didn't ever think I would actually, be this close.
Yeah. It's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
So in the end, it's Oi that they follow, not Roland, as he's gotten Andy's scent from back in the Dogan on the other side of that portal. And I want to focus on this. This is my setup for Roland is wrong about Jake. Jake thinks about Andy and the Dogan, and it sends him spiraling. Yes, Jake said, although he'd had a bit of a bad turn, remembering how Benny's dad had screamed. Andy, the messenger robot, apparently tired of Slightman's grumbling, had pushed or pinched something in the man's elbow, a nerve, perhaps, and Slightman had hollered like an owl, as Roland might say, and probably with at least mild contempt. Slightman the younger was beyond such things now, of course, and it was that realization, a boy once full of fun and now cool as riverbank clay, which had made the son of Elmer pause. You had to die, yes, and Jake hoped he could do it at least moderately well when the hour came. He'd had some training in how to do it, after all. It was the thought of all that grave time that chilled him, that downtime, that lie still and continue to be dead time. So, like, this is just a friendly reminder that Jake is not doing well at all, Matt. He's still hours removed from the death of from the death of his friend, which he blames for him. He's moments removed from walking into the Dixie Pig, completely prepared to die. And we see this willingness to die, this acceptance of death, this kind of assumption of death is still present in his mind. Like he feels like he's going to die. He's just waiting for it.
I mean, he's become, I think you would say, morbid. Like, he's thinking about it a lot. It's surrounding him. He's a bit fixated on it in an unhealthy way. I mean, I think I've been good about remembering that Jake is this kid who, just horrifically lost his best friend recently. But I've been less good about remembering that Jake is this kid who has memories of dying 2 separate times. Mm-hmm. And like, that's got to fuck you up. He just, the pair like everybody around him is dying. He's on this mission and he's just like, yep, I'm going to die. And he's not doing well.
I'm going to die. But it's okay because he can get a laugh in before he does, because the group gets to a staging area where it finds hundreds of wolves in various states of repair. Jake suddenly looks at some of them and starts laughing. He's imagining the wolves sitting in the repair stalls as commuters at Penn Station, and he starts laughing hysterically. And Eddie and Susanna see what he's talking about, and they start laughing too, even though, I mean, it's not really that funny of a joke, Jake. It's okay. They're just in a okay.
It's okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel like everyone's nervous and they're just happy to be together, and so
they are.
That's. I mean, a big part of laughing is reassuring everyone that everything is okay. Honestly, if you dig down into the psychology,
but it's not. This is what I mean by where Roland is wrong about Jake, because he hears this laughing. And he says, so, Roland thought, Jake's seeing must have been true. After all they'd been through, this did not surprise him. What made him glad was to hear the boys' laughter. It was right that Jake should cry for the pair, who had been his friend, but it was good that he could still laugh. Very good indeed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Roland looks at this and says, okay, he's sad. I get he's sad. He's lost friends. He's lost people important to him. But look, he's laughing, and that means he's okay. And I think he's wrong.
Yeah.
I think Roland wants to believe that. He wants to believe that Jake, his son, we talked about that last week, that his true son, true father, they've taken up this role of father and son in a more formal way that has ever been in this story. And I think he wants to believe his son's okay. And he's looking at this laugh, this kind of weird, out of nowhere, a little bit over the top laugh at a funny thought he had, and saying, okay, good. Nothing wrong here. We're all good here now. And no, Jake is not okay. Yeah, he's not.
It's closer to an unhinged, trying to find something to distract him laugh, maybe.
Yeah.
I like that. I like this framing a lot. And also it's even Roland just saying oh, he cried for the pair. It's he's crying for everything. He's crying for the stress, for the trauma, for all of the people who have died recently, for God, the kid is screwed up. To say that he's just crying because, oh, the pair died, an hour ago. It's like, okay, like,
Yeah.
like you'd expect a normal person would react more than that, even if it was just one person who died recently.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got just more and more helpings of trauma being piled on his plate before he can even process the first one. So,
yeah.
Like,
So,
it reminds me of Roland, right? Because Roland is this kid who also started early in life getting terrible tragedies heaped upon him, and then it just kind of never stopped. So, yeah. Anyway,
it's okay as long as he's laughing. We're okay.
Yep.
So they eventually get to the door to the Thunderclap, which is hopefully marked with like a thunderbolt, because I guess people can't read. So Thunderclap station.
Sure.
Boom. The door is mechanical and isn't working right. This is not a magic door. This is a mechanical door. And as they walk through, it makes them all sick to their stomachs immediately. And I think this is a fun thing that King did here, is that he primed us through both Mordred's perspective and through the perspective of our characters, that like, walking through this door, they should expect resistance like immediately, that there are going to be people there trying to stop them. And then there are people there, and we're like, shit, all our characters are throwing up and are unable to defend themselves. And here comes the people, and here's the battle right away. But fortunately, Matt, the three men are wearing blue chambray shirts, which mean they're the good guys. Probably.
Of course. Stephen King characters wearing blue chambray. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be bad if you were.
I need to get like 14 blue chambray shirts.
And then you never have to wear anything else.
Yeah.
And also, you'll look cool.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny because new stills of the Stand miniseries came out today, because that's coming out in a week. And it has Randall Flagg wearing a blue chambray shirt. So I'm being a little bit ridiculous here, because it's not just the good guys that wear this stuff. But
so funny.
But the point is, these people say they recognize them as gunslingers and immediately say, hey, we're on your side. So we feel a little bit good about that. But there is that moment of tension when they're like, oh shit, they're sick to their stomach. And our characters have bad habits of going through doors and immediately being ambushed by people.
That's true. I wonder if this is like we're setting up a 3-beat and this was the subversion of they go through this door, you're expecting the ambush, and then it's actually just friends. That's maybe.
And so there are three guys here. The one in the middle is this old man with long hair, and he takes one look at Jake and he recognizes him. Bobby, he said in a voice that was not much more than a whisper. My God, is it Bobby Garfield? And that's where our chapter ends.
Uh-huh.
Matt, who's Bobby Garfield?
He's probably some kid from the Hogan.
No, I think he's like that. The Spider-Man, the bad Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
Garfield. Bobby Garfield.
That was his name was Bobby Garfield, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Something like that.
Yeah, this is not the no good Spider-Man.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Spider-Man this week. It's really interesting.
You can't not talk about Spider-Man.
It's because
that's just because it's been in the news.
It has been in the news.
Tobey Maguire is going to be in the new Spider-Man movie, and so is Bobby Garfield. He's going to be in it too.
Isn't the actor who was Doc Ock again?
Yes, Alfred Molina. I don't know how they're going to do this, because they're all like a lot older. This is not the Spider-Man podcast, so we're not going to talk about that.
This isn't the Spider-Man. Okay, all right. No, it's really hard for me to stop, but I'm going to make myself stop. Okay.
Not just because there's a man spider does not mean it's a Spider-Man. That's what I'll say.
You sure? Okay.
Now for the discussion question: who's your favorite Spider-Man? No, we got to move on to our discussion question from last week, because we are finished with this week's reading. We end on a little bit of a cliffhanger there, Matt. You'll have to wait until, I guess, tomorrow when you start reading the next section to figure out who Bobby Garfield is.
All right.
And why Jake looks like him, apparently. So our question from last week was, select one of your favorite literary characters and then describe what their mind trap projection would look like. And Matt, this question was kind of a bust. I mean, we got answers, but we got like half the amount of answers we normally get. So you never know what questions are going to be hits and what are going to be busts.
It's the kind where it's thought-provoking, but very little immediately jumps to mind.
Sure. We do appreciate everyone who still sent some in, and we completely understand if you took one look at this question and said, nah. But let's read our responses here.
I finally figured out, I think this username is allhate4001. all
Okay.
hate, but it's all anyway. All 84,001. The only they say the only character's mind trap I can say confidently is Homer Simpson. It would be a room full of Flanderses in his skin tight ski suit, repeating, "Feels like I'm wearing nothing at all," over and over. Stupid, sexy Flanders.
The path to our hearts is through Simpsons references.
Yes,
so
it is.
Well done. I love that. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. RL Raider says, in an inversion of the mind trap, the party in the Order of the Stick falls under an illusion where their deepest desires are fulfilled. All their enemies are defeated or converted, and loose ends are conveniently tied up. When they eventually get out, it's because one character realizes many of his deepest desires were either silly or should never have happened. Reconciliation with his evil family, dinosaur rides, and his puppet/god getting a girlfriend. So it was a reverse mind trap.
Yeah, that's really fun. I love that idea. It's funny because I was like, I don't think I've seen many mind traps in fiction, and then when you make me think about like, oh, but like illusions and dreams, that's a thing that happens all the time, actually. So
yeah.
I Can't Drive 69 says, not sure about a specific character's mind trap, but the whole concept of a mind trap reminded me of the show Lucifer, based on the Gaiman comic. Gaiman? I forgot. The show itself is a seriously mixed bag, but it has an interesting take on what hell is. Basically, it's your own feeling of guilt that places you in hell. And when you're there, it's your own mind that constructs your method of torture. For example, reliving a particularly horrible moment in your life. You can leave at any time. In Lucifer's own words, the door isn't even locked. But no one ever manages to break free of their guilt and forgive themselves. So yeah, Lucifer's version of hell is basically a mind trap. That's cool. That's horrifying.
Yeah, super, super cool.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
Tight Rhyme says, one of my favorite literary characters is the gorilla Ishmael from Daniel Quinn's Ishmael. I guess his mind trap would be the entirety of human civilization just living outside the law of biological competition, waging war instead of merely competing to the best of their ability. I've never read this story, so that's cool, though.
Seems really weird. Cool. Perry Jane says, I immediately thought of Jane Eyre. Her mind trap is most certainly the Red Room. She would be pounding on the door, begging to be let out for the duration. Perhaps if any creatures were to appear, it would be the poor madwoman in the attic. And I think it would just be her. But I think it would just be her. Certain she'll be alone forever in the Red Room with an unformed shape waiting under the bed or behind the chair. I feel like I should read Jane Eyre. I've heard good things about Jane Eyre.
Yeah, you should read Jane Eyre.
Sounds really creepy.
We should do a book club of Jane Eyre.
Okay,
that'd be fun.
Put that on the list.
We should do more classic literature in book club. We don't do that very often. Next up, we have Complicated 9519, who says, I'm going to go with Dr. Alan Grant from Jurassic Park, my favorite movie ever. He kind of already had a mind trap in Jurassic Park 3, and I guess Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom officially brought his mind trap to life. Dinosaurs coming to the mainland, or him going back to one of the islands. His mind trap would be similar to Jake's, where it'd be dinosaurs. Yeah, that's true. I think his mind trap would be dinosaurs, yeah. Or we could go with Danny Torrance from The Shining, and we can honestly say that his mind trap would be the Overlook Hotel, because technically it did become a mind trap in the time he spent there.
Interesting, yeah.
Certainly did.
Seems good.
Yeah.
Shortstop 88 gave a very long answer.
But this is the reason I pulled this whole thing is because I think Shortstop 88 really dives into what mind trap actually means.
Sure. Okay.
And I think it's fascinating.
I'll read this. At first glance, it's supposed to be something that the trapped person fears, but not necessarily their greatest fear. It needs to be something not so obvious that they would notice the trap is effectively pulling something from their own thoughts. So the mind trap is a slow burn, which is why it affects that hallway. It sparks things within the trapped person's mind that allows them to follow tangential thoughts, like when you're showering and trying to remember what you said in a conversation, and suddenly you're thinking about Roman aqueducts, and you can neither tell how you got to that point, nor if you had just soaped your entire body or simply skipped to the last body part in your wash cycle. The mind trap is simply mind tangents and will pull at things on the edge of your consciousness. Like a movie you watched when you were younger but can't remember anything besides a few details, as seen with Jake. If the mind trap was simply something a person feared, it'd be just the boggart from Harry Potter. The difference is the mind trap can't be beaten by simply being aware of what it is and shouting a silly word. Being aware that you're confusing yourself does not beat it, and the trap will pull you away as soon as you try to come up with a solution to beat it. Cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that is undoubtedly true. There's a tendency to simplify this as just a thing that knows what scares you, which is not what it is.
Yeah.
Or I mean, it is partially, but it is more than that. I love the little wrinkle of it that like most of these things is when you find out that the thing is feeding off of your fear, you just say, okay, well, I just won't be afraid anymore. And that's how I beat.
It's not real. Yeah. It's like, well, no, it is real here. It would eat you.
Yeah. It's not enough here. It's not enough. And it's why it's a perfectly designed thing. Because all you can do is shoot the thing that you can't see.
Yeah. And once again, it's a cool thing because it's the old people's technology doing the sort of thing you normally see in a story where there's like a psychic illusion or something. It's like, well, it's psychic, but it's like technology psychic.
Yeah. It's like they saw a Stephen King monster and said, got to be a way to recreate this thing.
Yeah.
And they built a machine to do it.
They didn't, they were so concerned to see whether or not they could. They didn't stop to think if they should.
Okay. I'm not laughing at the Jurassic Park quote, although good job. But like midway into that quote, you kind of just sighed. You were just like, yep, I'm doing this again.
Yep.
I don't know why you did that. Why'd you do that, Matt?
Because one must be self-aware, Scott.
Next up, we have Steve D, who says, let's put Gollum in the mind trap. Here's what I'm thinking. Gollum is trying to catch up with Frodo and Sam. He reaches them. Frodo turns, pulls out the ring, and throws it down the hallway. It hits the ground with a clang that echoes off the walls and rolls down the hall. With a gasp, Gollum dives for us, misses, and chases after it. Frodo and Sam laughing loudly behind him. Each time Gollum gets close, the ring hits a bump, slips from his fingers, or somehow gets a burst of speed. Out of the corner of his eye, Nazgul are giving chase. A final dive, and he has it. He is sure if he puts on the ring, he'll be invisible to them and be at peace. He slips it on, feeling white-hot fire on his finger. The Nazgul surrounds him, swords drawn. No relief, no calm, just death.
Love it.
Fuck, Steve. That was intense.
That was a nice little horror story. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Jeremy says, sometimes we actually get an example of the character's fears, like in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Pee-wee has a nightmare about his beloved bike being destroyed, his tower, so to speak. It drives his quest from start to finish. An accessorized bike was smuggled across the country, and the childish man in the gray suit followed. Excellent. I could think of a bunch of characters and fears, but I think my answer will stay in with the show. They say Eddie Dean would see Henry in the hall with heroin.
It's alliteration.
They say, do I get points for alliteration?
Yes. You get 7 million points. You're the winner. Congrats.
Yes. This version is the great sage and eminent junkie Henry Dean. Of the great sage and eminent junkie Henry Dean would represent to Eddie that losing his quartet and succumbing to his old ways would be to become the prisoner again. But this time he would know he failed. He would know that he's lost. It's one thing to know your purpose, but to find it, lose it, and return to the very thing you left behind, that is something quite different. It would mean living the life of a husk of yourself, and that is quite haunting. Wow, yeah, it's fucked up. Love it.
I love it. Next up, we have Luke V, who says, I'm very tempted to stay in theme with my previous answers and go into detail about the mouse Matthias's mind trap probably being in the lair of the snake Asmodeus. Man, so much Redwall. But it has the head and barbed tail of Clooney the Scourge. I love it. But I feel like I should go with Jon Snow and talk about his mind trap being a room full of daddy issues or whatever. Honestly, the Redwall answer is more fun, so I'll stick with that instead. I think that's a perfect, especially if we're talking about show Jon Snow, that's a perfect summation. His mind trap's like daddy issues or whatever.
Excellent. Yeah, that's pretty much my read on Jon Snow from the show.
Yes.
Lincoln C says Lady Macbeth stuck in a laundromat without any quarters.
That one took me a bit. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. It took me a couple seconds to go, wait, what?
Not gonna be able to get the spots out.
That's funny.
You know, this isn't really an answer. This is just an observation that in the Wheel of Time, there is actually a thing called a mind trap, but the book never really tells you what it does exactly, other than like you put it on a person and then you sort of can kill them easily.
Trap them. You just trap them.
It's not like you even have control over them. It's just like it's like, oh, what a cool word that you've used for a thing that you never actually explain. So
you take the mind
and you trap it.
Trap it.
It's good.
The end. All right, next week's question. We talked a lot about Deus Ex Machina on this week's episode, so I'm going to ask you what your favorite Deus Ex Machina is, and describe to me why it's not bad, why it's actually good, because it probably is, because Deus Ex Machina does not mean inherently bad, as we discussed this week.
That's right.
So talk to me about your favorite Deus Ex Machina and why it's actually super, super good.
I expect everyone will have an answer to this.
Yeah, you please single spaced, size 10 font, 7 pages. And
why are you doing this?
And actually, you're all going to be expected to give a presentation to the class that has to be at least 10 minutes long. So
he's lost it, folks.
In 7th grade, I had to give a presentation about Jim Bowie to my class for Texas history class, and it was the most fucking intimidating thing ever, because to a however old I was in 7th grade person, 10 minutes is a lifetime. That's so much time, and now I do it for 2 hours and 10 minutes a week, and it's nothing.
Yeah,
it's nothing.
Yeah, things get a lot easier. I wish someone had told me that, actually.
Yeah,
it's not always going to feel like this, little Matt.
Yeah, I also wish my Texas history teacher would have allowed me to talk about Roland Deschain and not Jim Bowie.
Yeah,
dude just had a big knife and he got sick and he died.
Yeah, you could have just kind of mixed and matched.
I should have just started talking about Roland and seeing if she noticed.
Yeah,
all you have to do is say big knife.
Yeah, and
then you just talk about Roland for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
boom.
Jim Bowie had the 2 knives on his hips with the Warren sandalwood grips.
My favorite thing about Jim Bowie was his talking animal companion.
Yeah. Yeah, his quest for the tower in North Texas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually where the Dark Tower is located. Little known fact. We need to go. We need to stop the show. So that is it for us here on Kingslingers. Next week, we'll be back covering chapters 5, 6, and 7 of part 2, Blue Heaven. Maybe we'll get to see what Blue Heaven is next week. I don't know. I mean, I do, but this is part of the whole thing.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't read the chapter names ahead, so I'm just like, what is that? Anyway, remember you can reach out to us at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod, and of course the Doof Media subreddit is the place to go to read other people's answers, give your own answers to the discussion question, or just post memes.
You said memes with such contempt or memes. If you've sent us an email recently that wasn't a discussion question, apologies for not responding to those. I am in the middle of moving into a new house, so my life has been insanely hectic right now. So I will get to those emails eventually. Please keep them coming. We love hearing from you folks. It's so much fun to chat with y'all. And the emails that I am allowed to share with Matt based on what you guys say, I am forwarding on to him, so he is reading them too. Matt, we got a lot of compliments on your music again.
Oh, thank you.
People love your music. Yeah, Matt wrote the theme song. I don't know if we've said that recently, but yeah, that's all Matt. So thank you for writing that.
Well, thanks. Thank you, everyone. That makes me feel very happy.
Good. If you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, you got us so you can hear that sweet theme song every week. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
Yeah, and if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, please consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. We recently rearranged all the reward tiers, made it much simpler, much easier to kind of wrap your head around. So if you haven't looked at it in a while, maybe go check it out. Special thanks this week to our new patrons, Doof Dancers, Liam L. and James W., and Doof Trooper Bunslinger. I have a suspicion that Bunslinger is here because of this podcast. So thank you, all of you, and especially Bunslinger.
Okay, but real quick, what kind of buns do you think Bunslinger slings?
I think we all know.
Is it a hot dog bun? Is it a hamburger bun? Is it ciabatta?
I mean, that's not what I was assuming, but yeah, sure, Scott. It's ciabatta.
You meant like butts.
I meant butts, yeah.
What would butt slinging be, Matt? Please describe to me what butt slinging is.
Well, you take the butt and you sling it.
All right, folks, if you cannot afford to donate to us right now, or after that whole thing, you just don't feel like doing it, there are still tons of ways to help us out. You can share this podcast with all your Stephen King loving friends and family members. It's the holiday season. Give the gift of Kingslingers. Or you can help us out by just leaving us a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from, I forgot to change the name. It is not that person. It comes from Bridges W, who says, "Long days and pleasant nights. I initially subscribed to Kingslingers because of a targeted Facebook ad. Oh my God, they work. I thought this will probably not be that great. Oh no." But Scott and Matt have taken a series that quietly shaped and continues to influence my life, and have woven in an incredible vocal tapestry around the tower and our protagonist. In some ways, I am drawn to this podcast like a failed priest initiate would be drawn to vocal seminary. Thank you for enriching our lives with this thorough and thoughtful analysis. Thank you, Sai. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. Well, these are always so well written. I'm like,
isn't that the
amount of time you people are putting into these. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Scott. Yeah.
No, I just I don't mean to make any assumptions about the quality of writing of reviews, but I feel like our reviews are just fantastically well written.
Yeah.
It away with the words.
Always makes me smile. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I am drawn to this podcast like a failed priest initiate would be drawn to vocal seminary. That's beautiful.
I love it. Yeah.
And I'm not just saying it because it's saying nice things about me, although that does help. Uh-huh. It's well done, everyone. Thank you so much to everyone who has taken the time to leave those reviews and those ratings. They really do help. We really do appreciate it. We love y'all. Keep listening. Keep reviewing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So that's it. We're finally done. We'll see you back here next week as our characters make their way over to that big old prison that's causing those big old problems. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.